Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we've got the top 5 tips for you as a support to climb in whatever elo that you're stuck in. Check it out guys, and hope you enjoy. So let's jump into it as our number 1 tip starting off for the support role in solo queue, which is going to be brush control. Now, when you enter lane, there are 3 brushes nowadays, the one on each of your side and the one in the middle. At the stage of the lane phase where you first enter it, it's really important to gain control of the one in the middle. We'll call this middle brush or brush 2. The reason why this brush is really controlling and really important for your laning phase is because it allows you to not only harass people while in the brush, but it also gains you access about zoning other people out of the brush. The most important mechanic that goes on is if you cast a spell in the brush, then it means that it's significantly harder for your opponents to dodge those skill shots, meaning that it's very easy for you to harass anybody who's looking for last hits or trying to push the wave. On top of that, by getting access to this brush, it allows you to then have control of the lane. Remember, when we hit level 2, we always have control over the lane because of the fact that we have 2 spells. So reminder that it's the first full wave plus the first 3 melees of the next wave. And with brush control, it allows us to then have the push advantage in this sense, allowing us to hit level 2 significantly earlier. On top of that, now that you have control of the laning phase and you can push or pull the lane after the first 2 waves are pushed in, or maybe the third one if you haven't pushed very far and you need to get the cannon in, then it allows you to have brush control. Brush control not only allows you to, as we've stated before, shoot skill shots and hit people very easily from harassing from brushes, but it also allows you to de-aggro minions. A really important thing in the early stages is when you auto attack or cast spells that are targeted at players, the minions will turn and auto attack you. On average, 3 ranged minions auto attacking you is the equivalency of a player actually hitting you. But with brush control, what you can do is come out of the brush and force your auto attacks and then go into the brush where there's no vision of you, causing fog of war, and the minions will de-aggro. This allows you to have a lot of control when it comes to trade patterns, and it allows you to de-aggro and lose a lot of damage on your character's HP bar so we can stay healthy and control the waves and push. So leading into that is going to be number 2, which is roaming. Now, the easiest time to roam is whenever you've pushed in a wave to the turret. By doing this, the wave is stuck on the enemy turret, and it will allow you to then get access to any side of the map. Since the enemy players are catching the waves, the way I want you to think about it is minions are like wards. They walk over and give you vision of a location, knowing whether or not people are in the brushes or river that you have to deal with. So by pushing the wave as we've established through the brush control, you can now unlock yourself to roam anytime that you push the enemy team into the turret. Whether it's establishing some wards on their buffs in the early stages, or potentially clearing out any vision, or contesting that early game scuttle. This roaming in the early stages is really great for you to snowball a huge advantage in the early stages, and it's why having the push is very helpful. It gives you a lot of options and movement around the map. Another thing to note too is if you are pushing into the turret, this is mostly predicated on the fact that you have a lot of CC or good skirmishing in the river when you're roaming in the early stages. Now, another option when it comes to roaming comes like this. Usually off of your reset, you kind of have an option to either roam to mid lane or to go back to bottom lane. So let's talk about the things that go into the factors when it comes to making these kinds of decisions. Usually when you roam mid, it's either because of the fact that the enemy team is pushing in the wave and you can set up a gank, or you have control of river brushes, so maybe there's a pink around the mid lane, or if your teammate has good setup. Now, one thing to note is paying attention to not only the mid lane, but the bottom lane. So, if for whatever reason you're concerned about your AD carry maybe getting dove and the wave is pushing all the way into the turret, sometimes it's better to go back to bottom lane, catch that wave, and then start moving up the river once you've established a push again. Another thing to pay attention to though is sometimes if a wave crashes on your turret and you've taken your reset, that means the wave is going to slowly start building and pushing towards the enemy team and could infringe upon your AD carry farming since it might get frozen on their side, making him incredibly susceptible even though he wants to push in the wave, and most likely what you've all encountered where your AD carry dies for going for a wave. This is still an important time to go down there and make sure that you catch the wave. The only real time that you should be going mid is if it's been off a neutral wave, or if you've gotten to push the wave and then take a reset, because then the wave should be pushing back to you. These are all great advantageous scenarios of wave control that are very linear and very easy to follow if you're just doing it consistently. One thing that's also really important to pay attention to, though, is the HP and mana of your mid laner. If they're relatively low on mana and HP, and they're most likely going to reset soon, we want to make sure that we're not walking over there when they're just taking a reset and there's nothing to do. Sometimes it's just better to go towards a neutral lane that's in the middle if there's nothing that can be obtained through mid. Now, one thing to note, though, is if you've completed your quest or like to buy a lot of pinks, this is still a great time, even if maybe you can't set up a gank, just to walk over and establish vision at your leisure. Most of the time, the way you want to put wards down is usually in the river and then pink behind it. So wherever you can get forward vision on your green wards, you want to pink relatively a brush behind it. That way you can see anytime a location is being contested for your pink wards. After you've established vision, then it's great to still go back to bottom. Make sure that you're constantly going mid pretty much after you finish your quest, regardless of the state of mid lane for the most part, because we want to make sure that we establish good, meaningful vision. If you kind of pay attention to walking all the way to bottom, pushing out a wave, walking all the way up the river, establishing wards in fixed locations, and then walking all the way back down, that's a significantly longer time for you to be walking around than if you just go straight to mid, establish wards, and walk down the river. Next up is going to be understanding your ADC and how his matchup plays out. In some situations, it's really important to play around your lane partner. It kind of impacts the power level of your laning phase, and it's really important to act with the restrictions of these kinds of scenarios. Playing with an Ezreal that's farming with long-range Qs, make sure that you're only taking trades when the wave crashes or if you've established a push. That way there aren't minions in front of you that are going to block a ton of mystic shots if you engage in an all-in. Playing with a Draven or a Lucian, well, this champion does a lot of damage in the early stages and a great dueler. So maybe in normal situations where Ezreal couldn't all in, we can now still all in with these kinds of champions since it's an advantageous and winning scenario. Fighting against a Jhin, make sure to pay attention to when he has his bouncing grenade up for hitting the range minions that will bounce on you, and also for his reload. We want to play around his 4-shot as much as possible, so starting engages or fights where either the enemy ADC Jhin is reloading or when your Jhin has his 4-shot up for quick bursty trades is really, really important. Making sure that you're just knowledgeable about how both your AD carry works with you and how your AD carry lines up in terms of playing around you is really important and will impact your ability to crush lane or actually get run over in a lot of situations. Next up, how to build enchanter supports. With the new items that came in, there's actually a couple of options when it comes to a lot of enchanters. Most people like to go Moonstone into Staff of Flowing Water, and it's a relatively consistent and powerful build. If you build this every time, you'll usually find great value in this, but there are a couple of other options when it comes to build paths. Number one, if you don't think that your champion needs to buff and actually has more value on his skill champions, so like a champion like Nami, sometimes Moonstone into things like Cosmic Drive can actually be exceptionally strong because it'll give you a ton of CDR, which will allow you to cycle your spells more frequently rather than just be a buff bot. Another option, honestly, with the Mythics, though, is Locket. Now, if there are a lot of enemy champions with a lot of assassination capabilities, maybe there's a Zed, a Kha'Zix, a Talon, etc., and you just feel like you're getting jumped on in one-shot over and over again and you don't want to get a Zhonya's, then Locket's actually a great option. Against champions that have win conditions of just blowing you up instantaneously, Locket can be incredibly powerful. And if you use this with combination of conditioning and the Guardian Rune page, you'll actually have about over 100 armor already just off of the item and the rune setup itself, and you'll be kind of hard to kill. Plus, on top of that, the shielding effect is really, really good. So if you have fast-paced fights, it actually is more powerful than the Moonstone that wants to have longer fights where it's cycling heals. So doing these kinds of builds can be really advantageous for you in certain circumstances. Also, another thing to note too is maybe you go Moonstone and there's a lot of crowd control on the enemy team. Maybe there's an Ashe Arrow, a Sejuani ultimate, multiple TF cards that are going off. Think about building potentially a Mikhail second. Staff of Flowing Water and Moonstone together work really well in tandem, but sometimes the game just doesn't want you to build that, and rather than building a stat stick buffer, you need to have more utility. So make sure that you're consciously thinking about that when you're playing the game and adjust your builds accordingly. Now, next up is how to build on tanky champions. Tanky champions have historically been more linear when it comes to their itemization, so there's mostly just one mythic that most people build, which is Locket of the Iron Solari, which is pretty much consistently strong no matter what, since it gives you a lot of HP effectively with the extra armor and MR rune aura, and also the shield itself from the Locket. This is a great item if you feel like you need to peel a decent amount, or maybe you're just running into another tank and front to backing, which is basically everyone is just hitting whatever's in front of them and not really trying to assassinate or dive them. After that, your second item is kind of just a deviation between Zeke's or Knight's Vow. If the enemy team is diving your AD carry or a certain carry that you want to keep alive instantaneously and Locket doesn't feel like enough, Knight's Vow is a good secondary item since it gives okay stat budget, but it really most importantly redirects damage towards you, so it makes it harder for your teammates to die. This is a great item especially for champions like Tahm, Kenshin, Braum, and Taric, but a little bit less of a feels good kind of build when you're playing champions like maybe Leona or Nautilus. The other option is Zeke's. Zeke's is really great, not actually because of its conduit effect, but its stat budget. A lot of times in team fights, since you don't usually take Presence of Mind nearly as much, might have you running out of mana if you're casting multiple cycles of spells. Because of this, the Glacial Shroud in Zeke's feels really powerful and allows you to cycle through your spells way more frequently. On top of that, it has Spell Haste attached to it, which is a really positive boon because it just allows you to cycle your CC more frequently, and usually it translates into some level of tankiness because of the fact that your spells are up more frequently. These are kind of the core fundamental mechanics for that, and that is great for being a utility tank. The other one now that's kind of come to the forefront is the Chem Tank build. This is mostly if you need to get engages off. Maybe you're the only engager, the enemy team has a lot of long range champions, Morgana, Caitlyn, Ezreal, etc. Or there's just a super fed AD carry or maybe a mage backliner that you need to score jumps on immediately. This is a great engagement, and it's basically the replication of our old Righteous Glory, so that's what you should basically treat it as. After that, though, for the most part, you should treat your itemization kind of the same. Usually, I'd probably lean more towards Zeke's if you're already thinking about all-inning because of the fact that it might be really difficult for you to always be in range of your AD carry if you're diving in, hence the Chem Tank. Other options are really just pure tank items, so some people go Dead Man's Plate for the extra movement speed because we're already on the thought process of getting movement speed, so we want to get more of it. Force of Nature also covers this movement speed if you need magic resist. These are all great items and more of a tank-oriented build path, but correlate really well with the mythic that you're building. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment in the section below, and hit that bell whistle. I'll see you next time. Peace.